Good evening, and thank you for joining me and my special guest, Tom Cannisi.
Stop.
Sorry if I pronounced that a little wrong.
You did good. You did good, man.
Today is the third episode of the How It's All Connected Lifestyle Medicine podcast, the podcast that helps bridge the gap between the research and the application of that research in the real world setting so that you, the listener, can be empowered with the knowledge to take control of your own health and wellness to live a happier and healthier life. And as I already alluded to a little bit today, I got with me, drum roll, Tom Cannisi from Orangetheory Fitness. And then those of you can't watching, Tom did the little
Yeah, I did the boom, boom, boom,
little drum roll there at the end. So I'm not going to explain too much about Tom, aside from the fact that this is one of my good friends from college. We met at SUNY Cortland back in, I believe, 2019. Is that? I believe
Yeah.
that's right.
2019. Yeah, we were both on that training grind over there, man.
Yeah. It seems like so long ago with COVID and everything that
Oh
happened.
my
But,
gosh. Oh my gosh. Seems like yesterday, but then at the same time, it was like, well, a couple years back. It's insane, man.
and Tom and I today are going to be diving into a little bit of more specific sciences, so to speak, on heart rate zones, kind of what Orangetheory has to offer and how they kind of go about training. But first, I want Tom to just kind of explain to you guys, who he is and, how old you are, where you're from, what got you into fitness, all that good stuff. So take it away, my
All
friend.
right. All right. Thanks, man. Thanks, man. So basically I am 24 years old. So we're the same age, right?
23, pretty close.
23, okay. Yeah, so like I'm 24. I've been in this fitness industry for 6 years now. So I've been working out all my life. Like my dad will tell you, I was working out since I came out the crib. But I didn't really get started into the actual profession until high school. And then that's when I started realizing, oh, like you can make this a job. And I met for the first time, I'll never forget his name, Vincent Carvelli. He taught me a lot of things in the beginning on just like the biomechanics of movement and like how specific and detailed you have to be. So
Mhm.
I fell in love with the science of movement on how it can, how it can benefit your overall health. And then that's when I kind of wanted to go into the physical therapy route. I did my intern hours. I even did my undergrad in exercise science to go in that route. But, life takes you in a different way. So then that's when I started developing into more personal training. I started working with athletes at a performance center when I was like 18. I started substituting for other coaches over there and helping out with group fitness over there. I trained athletes such as baseball, football, basketball, you name it, and I've helped train with that. And then once I graduated college, wasn't sure the path I was going to do after that, with COVID hitting and everything. So then I found out about Orangetheory from my cousins. And yeah, and my cousin's like, you should check out Orangetheory. It's really good. We love every bit of it. And I was like, okay. I was like, let's check it out. And ever since I learned about it, it basically goes along the lines of what we learned at Cortland, functional fitness. The heart rate zones were more new to me. I haven't really trained along those lines, but I mainly train functional fitness. Adam knows this. We both trained for that
Yep.
too. But yeah, we both trained along those lines. And yeah, and I've been in love with it ever since. I've been working there for now. It's going to be a year and like 7 months in. And yeah, and now I'm head coach at the Riverview location now.
Nice. So
Yeah.
just to touch on, I think we'll just
Yeah.
dive right in. Well, actually, first I'll say like Tom did touch on a little functional fitness, right? And
Yeah.
him and I both being alumni from Cortland, that was one thing that was kind of drilled into our heads, so to speak,
Yeah.
when it comes to starting, even as simple as warm ups. So starting from ground based, where you start supine, prone, half kneeling.
Yeah.
So basically, the whole concept is starting from laying on your back, flipping over
Yeah.
onto your stomach, going to a half kneeling position, so almost like a half lunge, right? And then
Yeah.
quadruped position. So if you guys are anyone ever done bear crawls and been sweating
Yeah.
like crazy and those horrible things, right? I'm using the air quotes, horrible. And then going
Yeah.
to standing and then moving. So that being the functional aspect, and then also trying to hit on every workout one of the 7 movement patterns. And if I miss one, please help me out here. But vertical push and pull. So there's 4 right there. You can count that as 2.
Yep.
We have core carry, lunge, squat, and I think that's 7. Yeah, look at that.
I know. Well, you said core, so basically, like you would have a twist. I don't know if you said hinge.
Oh yes,
You
thank you.
said
Hinge. Yeah.
hinge
Hinging
would be
pattern.
one of them. You had it right on gait and carry. In my opinion, I feel like plank should be in there. You know how primal it is to hold a plank. I feel like every move, like especially on the ground, like say for someone falls, you have to get back up. You're going right into a plank. So I feel like,
Yep.
I feel like plank should be in there. I mean, in Orange Theory, we use a lot of plank movements. Well, you'll see a lot of different movements in a plank position, and a lot of members I see that can hold just a regular plank can do a lot of the movements already, and therefore it'll set them up for every single other move that
And is
they're
that
doing.
more so like when we, and I guess we'll go a little specific on that, and when we say plank, are you saying from the elbows? We're doing like a tall plank, or we do like
I would say any form of plank
Okay.
would be fine. Any form of plank, as long as you're holding yourself in that horizontal position where gravity is working against you downward, you know. And that's because I've noticed a lot of people, like when they start out, if they can't hold a plank already, every other move that they do is more difficult. But once you can master that plank, every move from there, you can stay strong with it. So,
it almost transfers the ability to hold the body in that like you're saying, that horizontal plane without almost the anterior tilt. So having your hips, for the listeners, anyone that's not watching, having your hips dip inward. So instead of, so basically like that, the arch that we've seen, that I'm sure everyone's seen a lot with people that may be doing squats or overhead pressing where they're arching the back a lot, being able to control the body. Because like you said, I agree with that, that a lot of the movements that we do, whether it's standing or on the floor base, half kneeling, anything like that, requires a lot of that core stability and overall body control that you get from a plank. So I've never heard that argument to throw it in the fundamental movement patterns.
I honestly, I feel like, and that's a big component. And I would, that was the main move I would test out when I had one-on-one clients. When I had one-on-one clients, I was like, show me a plank, show me how you do it.
And the assessment, correct?
The assessment, yep, sorry. So like once I do the assessment and everything, I really focus on the plank. How can you hold a plank and what can you do in that position? And once I see, like, you can sense and nitpick little tweaks in how their form is. So say for instance, like you have them sagging their hips. You know, they're not keeping their core in control. Maybe their glutes aren't engaging into that plank either to keep themselves still. So those are like little things for me to see, okay, maybe there are some weaknesses in their control. Because if you can't control that your body there, you know, how does it translate when you do other movements in standing position, lunge position, any other position you go into, you know?
Yeah. And do you, so when it comes to, I guess we'll, keep diving into that, because I think this is a great way
Yeah,
to
you
start.
know, when we get into
start talking about fitness, maybe straight up plank. What are some, say you do have someone with that anterior tilt or the, as you said, the hip sag, almost lower back sag. What are some cues that you would that you give people to help correct that?
Well, I mean, one, it depends on the person. So we could go over many cues on what they could do. And I learned from Orangetheory being a coach, which we'll definitely dive into this too. When you keep coaching different groups of people, different populations, because there are different populations that come into the studio. You'll see Gen Pop, geriatrics, you'll see even athletes come in. We do have an athlete who played on the Buccaneers that takes classes over there too. Really? Yeah, so I see different styles of movement. And the thing with us coaches, we have to come up with a quick way to fix it. And that's where it gets hard. Like when we're one-on-one, it's different. Like when you're one-on-one, you have that time, but with group exercise, like we have to do it quick on the fly. And I'm telling you, that's why I'm saying like there are a lot of elite coaches at Orangetheory, because the way they are able to give those corrections and give those cues as quick as possible, and the members understand and they get it. Oh, forget it. It's there. Forget it.
You touched on something important, the individualization of each client. Excuse me, of each client, right? Like going from a Gen Pop who may have something hip issues, right, or lower back issues, and then going to geriatric population, and then even athletic population, and being able to sift through your dialogue or even hand-on cues to be able to accommodate to whatever they understand, right? Because everyone's going to have a different understanding of movement and different understanding of the cues you give. So I think that's really important. One of the things that we do as a coach, and that's kind of the art of
Yeah.
coaching, I'd almost argue.
Yeah. And that's exactly right, man. I mean, it's so important in that fitness industry to just, keep it on the money like that,
Yep. I know, I 100% agree with you. So to touch on Orange Theory a little bit, you kind of talked about it, just a tad. Like you
Yep.
do all different types of all different individuals, so to speak, when it comes to backgrounds and movement abilities. So when it comes to like something we've talked about off air a little bit, the heart rate zones. I know there's like a lot
Yep.
of good research on the effects of
Yep.
heart rate zones and targeting like specific cardiovascular benefits, which I think is a really awesome way of training, which usually is through like
Yeah.
high intensity interval training. But so what's their approach to first, the heart rate zones, if you could break that down for us, and then like I guess
Yeah.
their approach kind of on like the
So
overall health and fitness.
So the best way I can describe it, because I'm trying to think of it more in a simpler way of doing it, like just to like put it really quick.
Yeah.
Basically, so we train off heart rate zones. It just shows us or gives us a guide on how our body adapts to the workout on a cardiovascular way, right? So and that heart rate zones reflect that back to us. So say for instance, if you're overtraining, it'll show certain colors, certain percentages of your max heart rate that's used in to show, hey, you might be taking up too much of a level. Maybe we might need to take it down. Or if you're
Okay.
under training, it shows, hey, you might need to pick it up. So basically, that's why we need those heart rate monitors. So the 5 heart rate zones that show it, so you'll have gray and blue in the beginning. That's your warm-up zones in the beginning, right there. So that's a low end percentage of your max heart rate. You're able to walk, you're able to talk, and that's fine.
So would you say that's probably like if the first zone being like 40 to 50%, and then like
Yeah,
50
around there. Yep. And then the next level up would be around like 50 to 60. Now the top 3 is where we really focus on
Okay.
when we go into more high levels. So this would be mainly on treadmill and rower side because we have 3 stations. We have treadmill station, rower station, and a weight floor.
Okay.
This is where we really tend to pay attention more to it when we're on the rower or when we're on the tread, because that's when you're going to really see a lot of max efforts there. So the top 3, you have your green zone. That's our main thing. If you heard about Orangetheory, you hear about your green zone, you hear
Yes.
about your base. So basically your base, it serves in the beginning as your warm-up speed, but it's also an active recovery. That's where it's more important. If you're doing RPE, typically you're able to talk through it. So you're able to
Okay.
talk through it. It's typically around that mid range. I know I'm not that familiar with the RPE. We haven't used it in a while, but I know it's like along that mid end.
Yeah, and RPE is kind of tough because
Yeah.
there's 2 different ways there's the
Yeah.
1 through 10 scale, which is
Yeah.
more based off of just your physical feeling, and then there's the 6 through 20 scale, which is more
Yeah.
based off of like the heart rate zone. So you can imagine 60 being like, or 6 being 60 being your resting heart rate, and then 200 or 20 being 200 as your
Yeah.
max heart
Yeah,
rate.
because
Yeah.
they had 2 different versions of that too. So this one in percentage
Yeah.
wise is it's 71 to 83% of your max heart rate. So that's where
Okay.
start to see green. It should be a steady green right there when you're in your base. You should last up to majority of the class holding that pace. You should be able to talk during that pace.
Okay.
The next 2 levels up are your working zones. So basically your 2 working zones, that's where we see how many minutes you're in those 2 zones for the class. So typically research shows that if you spend 12 or more minutes in between those top 2, so it'll be orange and red, it's supposed to give you an afterburn. So mainly majority of the class, if you're going into those zones, you're in around 84 to around 91% plus
Okay.
in those zones. If you get 12 or more minutes in between those 2, we get an afterburn. So your body will tend to burn more calories after the session, and it'll last up to 24 to 36 hours.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's after burn just being almost like a heightened metabolic state where your body is.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yep. Yep. Which will increase and stimulate your metabolic system as well. Yep. Perfect. You already got it down, man. See, I told you you could
Hey,
be a coach.
I'm. I appreciate it. I'm just asking questions, man.
Yeah.
I want to learn. I want to learn the ins and
Yeah.
outs just as much as I'm sure as the other
Yeah.
people that are signing up.
Now with a lot of members that we get, they focus so much on the splat. So I know one of those things that we've both talked about was now members might be taking 5 classes in a row or 4 classes in a row. How is that beneficial for their bodies and everything like
Hmm.
that? Every time we have a coach give a recommendations, we always say 4 to 3 classes if they're looking for a big results. Now this is for the member who may not be doing anything outside. So that's the typical member who isn't doing anything on the side, who isn't doing any weight training, any other running outside. In order to get those results, they do have to come in 3 or 4 days a
Hmm.
week. I mean, we know this with training frequencies. If we're
Yeah.
not come, if we're not, if we're not putting an effort, for that time, we're not going to see those results. Your body's not going to be able to adapt to what's going on. Now if you have a member who does things outside of the studio or outside of Orangetheory, we always recommend at least 2 days. At least 2 days. So this way
Okay.
they can get that cardio in as well as doing everything outside of it too. So we don't see a lot of overtraining going on because if you're separating your days and if you're listening to your body, if you're looking at what your heart is telling you, it's going to be very tough to over or under train. Now, does that happen? Yes, because there
Yeah.
are days where people go crazy, they get hyped. It is a party when you get up in there. So
Yeah.
it's a very exciting atmosphere. So it's just listen to your body, and the coaches are always there too to see what's on your screen and to just reflect that back to you.
Yeah. I
Oh,
think
that's a
two
good
important
question.
things that you hit on there was listening to your body. Oh, we'll get to happy faces.
I like that question. Yep.
Yeah, we'll get to you in 1 second, happy face, because thank you for the good question.
Yeah.
Two things you hit on that I think are really important is listening to your
Yeah.
body, right,
Yep.
and not possibly powering through workouts that maybe the day or two before or the day before you had a workout that really beat you up, and you're not physically there or mentally. I think listening to your body is very important, and then also the second thing that you touched upon is just having the coaches there and making sure that the coaches are involved in this process of trying to determine the frequency for yourself, right? Because
Yeah.
like you said, as we've learned in school, the training frequency really does depend on your training age, right? So how
Yeah.
long you have been on a consistent program, because we sometimes think I've been working out for X amount of months, but it isn't just about working out. It's how long you've been training on a consistent program
Yeah.
for those months or for those years, and understanding that someone that's a beginner maybe only needs to work out 1 to 3 times a week, opposed to
Yeah.
3 to 5 times a week. Someone that's more of an intermediate, or I don't know what expert is, air quotes expert is in this field of
We're
exercise.
always learning. We're
Someone who's
always
more of an
learning.
expert. So, Tom, would you like to tackle that the question
Oh
from
yeah.
Happy Face?
Yeah. So I mean, yeah. So we just learned because a lot of times people focus
Oh,
on the
I got to pause you
squats.
real quick. I
Yeah, you're
forgot
good.
that the people can't see the question. So, Happy
Yep.
Face had a question. Which zone is the best for fat burning / weight loss?
Yes. So now a lot of people would probably think, oh wait, I mean, come on, if you're getting the splats, you're in the top two. You start to burn those quality calories more in the green zone. So this is where it kind of gets like along the lines like, okay, that's like my active recovery. How am I burning more calories in that zone? So typically when we look at it from a recovery basis or when we look at it from keeping everything steady, you're spending that time at least 71 to 83%. Now, when you're spending majority of that time in that zone, you're actively recovering, your heart rate's at a steady rate. And that's what will help you with that fat loss, that burn loss, that extra calorie burn in the class. So there's a lot of quality calories that get burnt in that green zone. I mean, I wish I had more detail into it, but
Yeah,
yes. Yeah, but
no,
it is good. It's going to be majority of green zone. Now, does that mean, oh yeah, I'm just going to spend the whole class in green? No, sometimes you're going to have to put in that extra work and just level it out. But yeah, the green zone is where you would best burn fat or burn more calories in.
yeah. And just to go off that a little bit, one thing we learned in school is the respiratory quotient, which basically
Yep.
breaks down your carbohydrate to lipid burning,
Yep.
dependent on the intensity of the exercise. So usually, throughout our everyday life, we're burning predominantly fat as a fuel source. Doesn't mean we're going to lose weight just walking around the house, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Usually between about that like 50 to like 70-ish% of your max heart rate, you're going to be burning predominantly carbohydrates. So I think what
Yep.
they do, what Tom's talking about with the green
Yep.
zone, is that although you are getting those spikes up into the red zone, or maybe not, it's called the red zone, I can't remember, but the higher zones where you're above 70 or above 82%, 83%.
Like if you're above 84, that's when you're starting to hit
Okay.
more of that. Yeah.
So if
Above
you're
84.
below that and in the more of the green zone, you're going to be more apt to burning fats, simply just based off of the percent of your heart rate, because your heart, your heart isn't. You don't need the fats to burn. When it comes to high intensity exercise, your body is running off of carbohydrates, right? So anything over
Yep.
that 55% ish, you're going to be burning those carbohydrates. But when you drop back down
Yep.
lower in that green zone, that's when your body becomes more reliant on those fats, opposed to
Yep.
carbohydrates when you need that all out effort, or you're on that treadmill running as fast as you can. So kind of to answer that question, it'd be in between, in that green zone, on the lower end of that green zone. And then if you're doing something like steady state cardio, right? And I know this is a little bit different from what you do at Orange, but if you're doing steady state cardio, or something where you are using a heart rate monitor that's not at a class, it can be in between that, like I said, about 50 to 75, 70 to 75% range, where your body is relying predominantly on lipids. So that was a great question. Happy Face.
Yeah, I love that question, because that was something we just learned too when we went into it, because that was something that opened my eyes about the different zones too, because I'm still learning about the zones as
Yeah.
well. But yeah, like when they mentioned that, even in my head, I was like, wow. I was like, really, in the green? But yeah, there are quality calories that get burned when you're staying in that green zone. That's why they always say it's so important to spend majority of your class in the green.
And that's, that's not to say, kind of like what we talked about earlier with increasing your metabolic rate and increasing how many calories you burn when you are in those higher levels. So it's not to say that you're not going to be burning fat just because you're using carbohydrates. That's just after the workout, you'll be burning more calories. And then that also comes into like nutrition, right? Like what you're eating after, which is a whole different. I know you're not an RD.
I know I'm not. Yeah, I know.
We won't get into that.
Are you certified in nutrition, or?
I am not.
Yeah, because I know we're not allowed to give nutritional advice to any of the members. I can't tell them what to eat or anything like that. But we can refer them to dietitians, nutritionists. But what you eat, your sleep, also your age, your fitness level, they all put into account on how those goals will be reached and when they can.
Yeah, it makes all of those things you just talked about. I know I briefly talked to you about the pillars we have, the nutrition, sleep, fitness, mindset, socio-environmental, policy change, finance. All of those things really do make such a big difference. And although I am not registered in nutrition, we at CCHS, we like to kind of break down some of the science behind it and give you what the science says, opposed to giving my opinion on it. Because my opinion, for my diet, I eat I'm like pretty much just meat, fish, chicken, vegetables, fruits, and like nuts. But that's not to say that would work for everybody, right? So it's very individualized, kind of like what Tom said. Some people will have a good reaction to maybe something similar to my diet, or some people will need more. And it's not like I'm carbohydrate negative. Like I don't think carbohydrates but some people may need more carbohydrates just based on their past history, based on what they're doing for exercise. So it's really individualized. And it's
And
really
there's so many different types. I guess you can say diet, like, or the fads that are out there
yeah.
too. There's so, like the keto diet. You have like, the no carb diet. Like, it's so
Yeah.
many different things out there, and people are like, well, what can we do? What should we do? And I think it's, one, listen to your body, and two,
Yeah.
consulting with a registered, dietitian who is, certified, trained along these lines to guide you to it too. Because you can come to the workouts and do what you got to do, but if all the other pillars aren't hit, if you aren't getting sleep, if you're not hydrating, if you're not eating what you're supposed to be eating, it might be more challenging to get and reach to those goals.
Yeah, when I was interning at Union, the strength and conditioning coach there told me, I won't use the expletive that he used, but he said, you're here 2 hours a day. You got 22 hours to mess it up, right? So that kind of touches on Tom's point that it's really
Yeah.
it's not just the workout and coming in and sweating. It's about all of the factors outside of that. And one thing before we move on to the next question I wanted to hit
No.
on with Tom used the diets in air quotes, which I'm glad you did, because in my
Yeah.
opinion, diets are I don't like the word diet, because
Me
diet
neither. Yeah.
insinuates that you'll be stopping it at some point in time, opposed to
Yeah.
having a lifestyle and or behavioral change that will allow you to eat
Yeah.
different things and adapt to that behavioral change and lifestyle change, opposed to just saying, okay, I'm going to go on a diet from this month to this month, and then
Yeah.
after that and then it kind of leaves the door open for, okay, what are you going to do after that? What's going to happen? Are you just going to stop and then have
Yeah.
all the benefits that you had for those couple months disappear? Or
Yeah.
I think that was important you said that. I'm glad that you alluded to that.
Yeah. I mean, it's super important, man. Like, because it is a lifestyle change. It's a lifestyle difference in your life. If you don't want to just be healthy for a couple of weeks and then you're
Yeah.
back to the same thing. It's not. This is your health. This is your body. You should be taking care of it as best as you can. Do we have times where we slip up? Yeah.
Of
But
course.
at the end of the day, it's always just good to get back on track. You will have those slip ups, but always aim for progressing, not regressing.
And we're all human. We're all going to make
Yeah.
mistakes, right?
Yeah, man.
So the next one I got, as we talked about functional fitness earlier on in
Yeah.
the show, how does Orangetheory's emphasis and view on functional fitness kind of loop in with Cortland, or maybe add a little bit to Cortland's style, or how does it kind
Yeah.
of just explain to me what like you and can you also walk through, you were talking about how you go from treadmill to rowing machine to weights, kind of just walk us through a workout.
Okay. So I'll start by the walkthrough of the workout, and then I'll go into more detail on how the functional fitness it's very similar to
Okay.
what we've learned. Yeah, it's very similar. So the workout, we have different styles of classes with 3 different focuses. So we'll have a power focus. So you'll see a lot of max sprints or max inclines if you're a power walker that day. Which you're looking for high intensity but short amounts of time doing high intensity movements.
Okay.
It'll be longer rest periods, and that's what you'll be seeing on the rower as well. Max power, max effort. On the weight floor, you'll be seeing plyometric movements. You'll have strength where it's a different focus as well. You'll see inclines on the treadmills. You'll see a slower type of rowing, and then on the weight floor, it's more added resistance or maybe slower tempos. And then endurance will just be higher reps. So you'll typically see that the rep range hitting from 10 or higher on the weight floor. Rowing, you're looking for consistent tempos, consistent paces. And then on the treads is looking for longer efforts as well as staying consistent. That's why on endurance days, you can really burn a lot of quality calories on endurance days because you're not working too high up, but you're staying at that steady state.
Okay, so to kind of summarize that, it's almost like you're I guess you can correct me if this is wrong. So you're saying it's kind of each day is a different, not just discipline, whether it's power, strength, or endurance or hypertrophy, but it's a different energy system as well. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, hitting different energy systems. Even either way, you're still going to hit different types of muscle fibers too. But it does have different focuses. And now the way the class is structured is that typically we have a two group. That's our original type style of class. So you'll have one group that's all on the treadmill side, and then you'll have one group that we have on the rower side. Now, if you're on the rower side, each half will just be 23 minutes. On the rower side, you can go back and forth from rower to weight floor. And then
Okay.
on the treadmill side, the long your block or blocks can last up to 23 minutes
Okay. So
for the whole
what is
entire
an
half.
average workout about 30 minutes, an hour, 45
So
minutes?
it's going to be an hour. So it's going to be it's a 60-minute class. We typically end around 55 minutes, and then the rest of the time we have a flexibility block at the end.
It was just you took
Yes.
the thought from my brain, my friend. I was going to ask about cool downs because we kind of touched on
Yeah.
warm ups a little bit,
Yeah.
or we touched on Cortland warm ups. So I guess could you explain maybe if it's not just the Orangetheory's philosophy, but your philosophy on like warm ups and cool downs and kind of
Yeah.
how what you program for those? Because I know you said you're the head trainer, so I know you do
So
something.
yeah, I do not program for the classes.
Okay.
There is a separate job for that. So we do have what they call workout design specialists. They do
Okay.
work in corporate, and they work on every template for every month. They're months way ahead of us. They come up with new great designs. I'm telling you, their classes are really like they really think things out. They even have the medical advisory board test them out, which is it's a fun
That's
job. It's
awesome.
not, yeah. So you have so much research that goes behind these classes, which is great for both, the coaches, the members, the staff, and it creates a fun and exciting workout every single day, and they keep it brand new. Sometimes you'll see the same classes come back here and there, but it's always going to be brand new. It keeps your body guessing, keeps your mind guessing. Oh man, what's today going to be?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
so I do not make the program. So
okay.
I can't really say like I could tell you like the reasoning in my opinion why they may come up with it.
Yeah,
They
I
do
mean,
let us
yeah,
know.
if you don't mind, I mean, especially with the warm ups and cool downs too.
Yeah. So on the regular two groups, you do warm up on the treadmill and you do warm up on the rower. So as far as like with our warm ups, it may be a little bit different.
Okay.
There are classes where you have three groups and all three stations are its own separate group, and you
Okay.
get to transition from there. And then some people will start on the weight floor, and you'll see the same thing that we have. So you'll see a lot of breath work, quadruped position. You'll see a lot of supine work, even some standing work just to get the body temperature up, get the stabilizers working, and get your breathing intact on top of that too. Yeah.
So
So it's,
let me
yep.
just ask a quick question there. What is I know we did touch on it a little bit, but what is the importance of for individuals that may just be kind of getting into exercise and they don't fully understand why it's so important to warm up those different positions, doing breathing things like that?
Oh yeah.
Why is the warm up so important and vital for the success of the program and also for
Yeah.
I'm going to allude a little bit here, but injury prevention, right?
I mean, we can even go back to like with cars. I mean, if you're in a cold, your body, right? It starts out as cold. Same thing with your car. You go into your car, you start the engine. Now, do you just some people, if they're in a rush, they're gonna just drive out that parking space and they'll
Yes.
go. Now think of your body like that. If you go into a workout, you're cold, your body's cold, the muscles are just tight and tense, and your joints are just not warmed up.
Hmm.
How is that going to be when you're going to higher movements, higher intensity movements? How is that going to happen if your body's not loose enough, if your body's not strong or stable enough to adapt to the movements that we're putting on you, you
Yes.
know? And that's the reason why it's so important to warm up, because if you're warmed up, it's increasing your body temperature. The joints are more loose. The joints are actually going to be stronger to prevent any damage from any impact if you're doing any jumps, any runs on the treadmills, a lot of max intensity movements on the rower. So it could definitely help you prevent any risk of injury on that, especially when you have a proper warm up. Typically, we like to have our warm ups. It could be 3 to 4 minutes on certain ends of the spectrum there. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's for anyone that has been watching our body weight program, we did a body weight program for about 40
Yep.
weeks on Restream, Twitch, YouTube. all that good stuff. It's funny you use that analogy because I use the same exact analogy
Yep.
when it comes to cool downs, right? I
Yep.
talk about the importance of breathing and getting the nervous system,
Yep.
is usually what Tom's talking about right now is going from like
Yep.
the cold pipes of the engine, right? The cold pipes
Yep.
of the car being in a sometimes you can be in like a parasympathetic state or a sympathetic state where you're just come
Yep.
in and you're all like hyped up your nervous system. But usually you're more in that like parasympathetic, not sympathetic state. So you need
Yep.
to be able to get the nervous system ready for that movement as well. And then
Yeah.
also being able to say that you guys, anyone is doing a squat pattern that day or a lunge pattern that day.
Yeah.
You need to help prime those muscles
Yeah.
for the movement patterns of the day. Because if you're
Yeah.
not priming those muscles, you're not stabilizing the joints. You're not,
Yeah.
so getting those muscles engaged, so to speak. I'm
Yeah.
not a huge fan of the word engaged, but getting them,
Activated. Yeah.
yeah, getting them active. Then like you said, how are we going to proceed with the workout, right? And then
Yeah.
the car analogy I always used for the cool downs, and we'll
Yeah.
talk about here in a little bit, is imagine it's the same concept with the warm up and the cool down, except it's reversed, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to say you just drove your car, let's just say 90 miles an hour for you fluctuated. Hopefully no one's doing that and getting pulled over, but
If that
fluctuating.
car ain't warm.
Yeah. If you're fluctuating from 60 to 90 miles an hour for 45 minutes, and this is the analogy of the workout, that yes, this is live. I see you down there, Mr. Twitch. But if you're fluctuating 60 to 90 miles an hour, and then you just turn your car off, or you park your car and then you leave it running,
Yeah.
what's that going to do to the engine, right? And I'm not a
Yeah.
car guy, so I don't necessarily know. It's more of an analogy, but my importance here on like the breathing aspect of being able to get your body back from that sympathetic. So think, for anyone watching, I got my hand up in the air. Think sympathetic is like the high level, the fight or flight, and then the parasympathetic is that rest and digest. So you need to be able to, at the end of the workout, turn the car off and allow everything to cool down a little bit. And that's where breathing is really handy. It really comes in handy and is beneficial because it allows your body, if you're doing diaphragmatic breathing through the nose and out of the mouth. Usually it's for a tempo of longer exhales than inhales. Some people like to put, seconds on it. Well, they'll do 3 seconds in, 6 seconds out, or 4 seconds in, 8 seconds out. But the really important thing is just exhaling longer than you inhale for 2 reasons. One, like I said, it helps activate that parasympathetic nervous system, which is that rest or digest. And also, you got to think about what it's doing to not just the nervous system, but the body, right? Like you're allowing that almost recuperation period where you're bringing down the entire tone of your nerve, and then the blood pressure, the heart rate, right? Because when you inhale, you increase your heart rate. So think about the pressure, right? When you are inhaling, you're increasing the intra-abdominal pressure. You're literally increasing the pressure around your arteries and veins. So it's increasing the amount of heartbeats, right? When you exhale, you're decreasing that pressure, which allows for not only the parasympathetic activation, that rest or digest, but it allows for that decrease in heart rate. So you're kind of killing 2 birds in 1 stone there.
Yeah.
And it's really important to just make sure that at the end of all workouts, you are getting a solid, even if it's only 2 minutes. All it takes is about 10 breaths, 10 long exhales to get your body into that parasympathetic state. So even if it's only 2 or 3 minutes, I think it's really important. And sorry, I'm kind of long-winded on this.
No, you're good. Look, and you hit it on the head too. Like from the cool down perspective, like you are absolutely right on there. And I also want to add to it why it's even more important in the warm up. Now, from a musculoskeletal point of view, because I'm very big on that. When you focus more on your breathing, you're activating more of those deep muscles that are inside. And most of those muscles, from what I've been learning in my years that I've been doing fitness, is you're activating a lot of muscles that have to do with both the inner core and the spine. Now, if you're breathing a certain way, like taking those deep inhales at certain moments, deep exhales at certain moments, you're activating different muscles, and that diaphragm is working in line with the muscles in the core. So if your breathing is proper, your core is already going to be braced. Everything's going to be nice and tight. Your posture will even develop and get better from there. So you'll already be set up for success before you either take a session, take a class, or even a workout. If you just focus on that breathing. That's why we were so big at Cortland on breathing patterns, even breathing while actively moving. So dynamic breathing,
Yes.
along with static breathing. If we're putting those terms in there, it was just as important to breathe while moving as you were if you were just in a settled position too.
And I'm glad you brought that up. It's something that totally slipped my mind, and I think that's so important from your saying that musculoskeletal standpoint, because when you predominantly are breathing, as a whole in society, we are, I hate to say this, we're mouth breathers predominantly. And what mouth breathing kind of elicits or kind of creates is a lot of chest breathing and a lot of shallow breaths. So things are much more likely to, I don't want to say tighten, but have more of a tonic tone, be more tense, right? Because again, your nervous system is tense and it's in that fight or flight state. So like Tom was alluding to, if you come into the workout and you do even 3 minutes of and again, I'm maybe not the biggest fan of diaphragmatic breathing because we're breathing through our diaphragm every day, every second, but focusing on that breathing through the diaphragm instead of the chest, that can be really beneficial to help prepare you for those movements and almost in a sense loosen you up, but not loosen your muscles up, loosen your nervous system's tone so that your muscles can relax a little bit.
And I've been getting a lot of people, like a lot of members who come up to me and they'll say, coach, my neck, I feel a lot of tension up here, and at the end of the day,
for anyone watching, Tom was just like shrugging his, or not
we were
shrugging shoulders, and grabbing his neck, his SCMs, and just the
and that, I mean, one, that has to do with breathing too. It just has to do with form, maybe how they sleep too. Some people tend to do the arm underneath and stuff like that too, but it also has to do with breathing as well. Because if your breathing is tight, it's tense, you're going to feel tense around that chest, around the neck area too. And then also it will impact the movements you do. We could use a push-up, for example. If we see a lot of people just elevating those shoulders in those push-ups, all we got to tell them to do is breathe, relax, and automatically they're like, oh, wow, yeah. I'm already
I want to touch on that a little bit. That's something I see a lot. So I've actually just got into well, now I'm leaving the group setting, but for the past couple months, I was doing group coaching, and talking earlier about how it's tough to cue when you have to worry about multiple people, because you can't take that time to kind of individually, okay, this is exactly what you need to do, because you have to focus on other people. And one of the things that I've seen a lot is cueing breathing and longer exhales can help whatever that, almost perceived imbalance may be, or the faulty form can be helped by, and this is almost a change of intention too, right? Because you're changing their mental intention of the exercise, because they may look at the exercise as, okay, I go down to the ground, I gotta breathe, I gotta keep everything tight.
I gotta do all this stuff,
exactly. And then you get them down to the ground, and then you'll have them big inhale through the nose, longer exhale through the mouth, and you'll physically see that not releasing tension, but that ability to kind of almost drop into the position the way it should be, right? For the push-up example, instead of being uptight in the traps and not really, and you're still using the chest, obviously, but not really using your chest the way that you should be, allowing them to kind of relax a little bit. Because if you can if you can get in a push-up position, keep your breath held and drop into that quote-unquote correct form, and keep that breath held the entire time, that is impressive. You can do multiple reps of that. It's maybe not impressive in a good way, but that is very impressive. So I think
definitely. Yeah. And from what you said too, and you've worked in a group setting, it's more challenging. If it's more challenging to really, get those cues down. Because I know we both learned in motor behavior that everyone's different. You could tell them to go tie their shoes. They're all going to do it in different ways, right? Or they're like, hey, go touch the ceiling. There's going to be 5 million different ways they're going to touch that ceiling. So it's like, how can we relay all this information that we have to each and every one of them, and probably less time too, because I know with us, it's big on time. Like
Yeah.
you have to be quick, you have to be adaptable when you're going into these classes. And I know for myself, when I was a newer coach, it was a tough transition going from personal training 101 to really gain that time, and then you have to go into the group setting, and then you have to display all this information in different groups under certain times while focusing on a treadmill and a rower as well. But I'm telling you right now, like, you learn how
Yeah.
to adjust and adapt, and you really get to focus on like the simpler things. Like, I remember I told a member, what was it, who was doing a frogger. So basically think of a sumo squat while you're jumping.
Okay.
So basically, I remember this is when I was a newer coach. I went up to them, and their knees were just going to like a valgus. So their knees were just starting to come in, even on the sumo squat. So I was just like, hey, like, just keep your knees out, keep your chest tall, all these cues that we learned. All of a sudden, they was like, oh, just jump like a frog. And I'm like, oh, I'm like,
Yes.
all right.
And
Yeah.
it's interesting how simplistic things can be, because you and I eat, sleep,
Yeah.
and breathe fitness, and we look at things
Yeah.
sometimes from that more almost internal aspect, or maybe even external aspect of trying to cue them, and then realizing that it's sometimes a lot easier than
Yeah.
you think. Like I've had people when I do cueing for planks, or when I see someone,
Yeah.
usually what I try to do when someone's doing a plank, and I'm talking elbows on the ground plank, is making
Yeah.
sure that the elbows, hands, and wrists are parallel. So and with the
Yeah.
shoulders. So everything. Imagine for individuals not watching, it's stacked. Your shoulder is in line with your elbow is in line with your wrist, and so on and
Yeah.
so forth. And giving them that cue of, hey, make sure everything is in a straight line. I've had people go from my back is hurting to, oh really, that's all I had to do. And that's just
Yeah.
showcases how every not just every person is going to be different and have a different set of characteristics that define whatever the movement is in their head.
Yeah.
How everyone is so vastly different when it comes to the way they perceive the movement, right? So
Yeah.
how they look at that movement, and then how they organize their bodies around whatever the goal is, whether it's sitting down, standing back up, a squat, or
Yeah.
reaching down to the ground and picking something up, a deadlift. I think that's
Yeah.
one of the most important things we do as coaches, is allow them to not, because if we can, I actually might have said this last week. There's a verbiage or saying, like, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? And
Yeah.
we can have these we can tell them, put your leg in this position, that position, this position, but how are
Yeah.
they going to get back to that position when we're not coaching them? How are they going to be
Yeah.
able to find the correct position if we don't help them find it? And it's really tough when it comes to group
Yeah.
training to be able to get people to have the time to be able to get people to get in those positions, because sometimes it's a lot of dialogue, right? I'm sure you've had
Yeah. I
experience too.
mean, there's times I don't even have to talk. Like, there's times I'll just I'll was it like I mean, I'm practically doing either sign language or I'm actually acting out the move half the
Yes.
time. Yeah, and this is where you really have to like you have to really see like, what the best thing is for the class at that time, at that moment. I think a lot of coaches, we try to like over explain it on our mic or microphone and stuff like that, whereas like you could just do something simple as just a gesture,
Yeah.
and they'll get it on cue. You could just go up to them too. I know it's different with COVID going around. You can't really touch anybody as much
Yep. Yep.
as we used to. So I mean, but there are moments where you can like go up to them and fix it up, and it's right there. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways. I always find it fascinating, like watching coaches work the room, and
Yeah.
especially experienced coaches who are so good at multitasking. It's insane. Like, I've seen coaches who can literally cue the treadmills while fixing a member's form, and then going straight to the rowers and just to coaching from there. It's a sight to watch. Like, I'm telling you, like, the coaches are very talented at those studios.
It's an art, man. It's an art to be able to to be able to do everything that you just talked about, and hopefully,
It's an art, man. It's nice. It's nice to watch it. And because I have to always do evaluations, so I'm constantly seeing different things. I'm like, wow. I'm like these code. I'm like, it's insane.
yeah. And so switching gears a little bit here, this is a little bit
Yeah,
off the script. I hope you don't mind.
I don't mind it. I don't
Just
mind it.
I just thought of something when you were talking about like different positionings. So,
Yeah,
what is your opinion on the terms good position and bad position? So
good position, bad.
obviously, I know everything that we've been taught at Cortland when it comes to like functional training that things should look a certain way. And I guess
Okay.
the preface or what I'm trying to get at here is more on like an individual level, right? So
Yeah,
maybe someone doesn't have the capabilities for
yeah,
that perfect squat or something, whatever it may
yeah,
be. I guess
yeah,
just what, and then and the follow up question to this being, how do you coach someone if, because
yeah,
one thing you were just talking about, we want to be quick to
yeah,
explain everything we know in our entire arsenal
yeah,
and be able to explain the science of why it needs to look a certain way, but then kind of almost stepping back. And I've done this recently, having to step
yeah.
back and say, maybe they don't need to be able to get into that position. Maybe that this position is
It's
what
best
their
for
body's
them.
capable of, and they're not able. And it may be a quote unquote bad position, but
Yeah.
is it bad for them? It's because we talked about how individualized it is. So I guess I just kind of want to hear your
I
a little bit.
and that's something I think about too. And this is why I've been so well. One for us, like we come up with options at our studios too. So say for instance, well, I like to use the deadlift as an example. So a lot of our members we'll see a lot of kyphosis up top where they're just rounding, they're curving, and they're
They're
reaching
rounding
towards
rounding the top of the
yeah,
shoulders, looking like the hunchback in Notre
yeah.
Dame. Yep.
Yes. Now there are some members where it's already positioned that way. So now imagine you tell a member squeeze their shoulder blades together. Now, if we tell them that, it's still going to look that way, even though they're squeezing their shoulder blades. So how does that look for us? Is that something we can do for them? No. I mean, at the end of the day, we can just tell them stay tall at your tallest position. And then while you're remaining tall, you just push your hips back. And even though it may not look normally how it should look like a nice flat back, that's the best for that person. I think each
Yes.
person has their own anatomy and
Yep.
their own biomechanical mechanisms. So like more of like how they move and how it's proper for them at that moment until we find a way to really isolate and strengthen those areas that of opportunity where we couldn't strengthen that, you know?
Yeah. And I
So
think
like say for instance you have a person who's caving in the knees with a valgus or something like that, we could just add a band to that and just tell them to sit and stand, and it could just work from there. So it's always going to depend on the person
yeah.
and how they were made and how they adapt to movement.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, when it comes to things like that, we look for checkpoints.
Okay.
But I always say it's not good to go on those specific checkpoints, because like you said, each person is different. They have their own limited ranges of motion that they can do, and that's okay. At the end of the day, you're still strengthening. You're still getting in a very good workout. You're still progressing into maybe what we may want to see or may
Yeah.
see in the future, you know?
And I think one important thing there, especially we'll use the kyphotic example of what I
Yeah.
mean by that is that hunchback, like I was talking about. I know a lot of people
Yeah.
have probably seen individuals like that. One of the questions I'll always ask is, okay, yeah, first off, yeah, that's not in my eyes or other trainers' eyes, it might not be perfect form, but is it causing you any pain? Are you in
Yeah.
pain in that position? Is
Yeah.
this something that we need to address? And I'll actually bring up something a long time ago. You might not even remember this, Tom. When you and I were at Cortland together, you had a client that when that client was doing squats, they were having a hyperextension of their knees. And I remember bringing this up to you one
Yes.
time.
I know which one. Yep.
Yes, yeah, I remember bringing this up to you,
Yep.
and then while bringing it up to you, I remember asking, "Wait a minute, I'm coming at this as the things need to be perfect, which is a lot of what we do.
I remember
It
that
needs to be this way,
conversation.
that way. And I remember at the end of
Yep.
the conversation, I was like, wait a minute, I didn't ask the most important question. Is she in pain doing this? And you were like, no. And then that kind of
Yeah.
was something that made me look back at how coaching should be and how I need to coach, opposed to what movements I want to see and what my
Yeah.
preconceived notion of what it is. Because yes, over the months and days and years, whatever it may be, having that adverse stress on certain parts of the body may not be a good thing. But
Yeah.
also, people organize differently. And if it's not causing them pain, who are we to change that movement pattern and then possibly put them in pain? If you see what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah. And this could be the same thing as like if you're holding a plank, like a high plank with your arm straight, you see that little banana peel type arm where the elbow's kind of caving in, the entire time. Now that may look to us like, oh my gosh, like what do we do? But
Yeah.
is that person in pain? I mean, 9 times out of 10, they're really not. That's just how their body's structured. There may be ways or maybe research out there that shows that there are ways to fix that or
Yeah.
program that into
And
your programs.
and obviously we want to like you were saying, strengthen
Yeah,
the area, right? Like
yeah,
regardless of whether or not it may be causing pain, we still want to, in the example I was giving, strengthen the lower body, strengthen the entire lower limb
yeah,
in different positions, so that maybe that strengthening will eliminate that problem. Or in the example with the arms out, like you're doing a push-up plank,
yeah,
being able to strengthen the extensors and not just the extensor muscles of the arm, but being
yeah,
able to strengthen the elbow, the wrist, because
yeah,
it may be coming from a lack of wrist strength, where they have to then provide or lean on the elbow more,
yeah,
opposed to using the elbow or the shoulder. It could be a lot of things. So
yeah.
strengthening, instead of just looking at that one issue and being like, hey, you need to bend your elbow more. It's like, well, that might actually cause them more pain than just letting them do the movement the way they were doing it. So I think
Yeah, they're
I'm
yeah.
glad that you and Orange Theory kind of have that same
Yeah,
mind.
they're bending the elbow just the other way.
Yeah, the elbow inwards, not outwards.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, the other way. No, not that way, the other way. I think what I would really start to pay attention more is during plyometric movements is like like we add like a power push up in our program. So
yep,
a power push up, you're basically doing push up and a jump with it.
yep.
Some of you may want to clap after that. That's fine. However you want to do your nice power push up, little show offs, right?
Yeah,
Happy
right.
birthday. But when you land, that's where I'll kind of like keep an eye on. Maybe if it was a one-on-one client, I might not want to program, or if I see a member who's on the weight floor at that time, I may pay a little bit close attention to things like that, just to keep an eye, like, hey, how's it feel when you land?
Yeah,
And I may look at how the body absorbs that landing, like when it runs through, does it cause any elbow pain, shoulder pain? How do you feel during it? Like I would definitely pay attention during like plyometrics. Definitely,
I yeah, I
100%.
definitely I definitely agree with that, especially landing, lower body landing,
Yes.
upper body landing, single leg, double leg, doing
Yeah.
like almost the push ups like you were talking about. I think, because of course we're talking about, when we were talking about those two examples previously, it's about those individuals, not as a whole, and it's about those movements individually, not other movements as a whole. Because yes, there are times where we see
Yeah.
certain things like we want KPIs, so key performance indicators, right?
Yep.
We don't want the knees to come in, obviously. Where if you're
Yeah.
doing a box jump down, a decelerating box jump, then you may need to give some type of correction there. But it's
Yeah.
not. It's I don't want listeners to get confused. Like, oh, my elbows cave in every time I do this. That's a good thing. No, that's not what we're saying. It's just it's very
No.
individualized.
Yeah, it's very individual. It's like and with that specific client, I believe we were doing a body weight squat, like it was like an assisted
Yeah,
Swiss
yeah,
ball
yeah.
squat. So I think that was more of like I was just teaching her the movements while creating like the least impact on those joints. So it wasn't anything crazy. So it's good to keep an eye on that. And I remember I remember exactly who
Yeah.
it is and when we
It's
talked
funny.
about that.
It's
Yeah.
funny how talking about things that are completely not really to do with that made me think of
Yeah.
that conversation, right? It's kind of crazy how the brain works. And
I
speaking
re- yeah.
of the brain working, the last question I got for you,
All right.
kind of something I've been thinking about more is like the role of your mental in intention when you're
Okay.
working out. So when you have clients going from a very high intensity rowing bout or treadmill bout to something that requires a little bit more of that internal control and focus in like a plank or like an isometric, right? Any type of
Mhm.
isometric, the intention behind that with the client. So for example, like I just
Yeah.
said, going from really high heart rate and then having to have that client get back into a plank position. Now, strength may
Hmm.
not be the determining factor of why they wouldn't be able to do the plank for more than 30, 40 seconds, opposed to it being something more of mental intent. And then on top
Mm.
of that, training the mental aspect of the clients and training their
Okay.
ability to persevere through those hard and stressful times, going
Yes.
from that really high intensity and then coming back to, okay, now I need to internally focus a little bit more. And I'm not talking about cueing, but just focus more on my heart rate, bringing my heart rate down so that I can do this movement, because then that goes into the breathing rates, right? Because if your heart rate's up,
Mm.
you're going to be breathing a lot faster, which may fatigue your muscular systems quicker, opposed to if
Yes.
you can have that intent and intention of relaxing more. So I guess that's not really a question. I just didn't know if you had anything
No,
to
you're
add to
good.
that. My apologies.
So okay, so if I'm trying to wrap my head around the question, so the question is, how do you get them from going to shift their focuses on different things?
So kind of shift from going from that all out, higher levels of zones back to
Okay.
being able to, and how this is a mental training as well, and how that kind of carry
Yes.
overs into their life. Because if you can go from a high stressful situation like that, like a
Yeah.
max all out run in a treadmill, back to a um, isometric or even a movement that has more precision, like maybe like a kettlebell
Yeah.
snatch, right? Something that
Yeah.
requires more intent internally and control internally.
Yeah.
It's kind of the benefits that has, because that kind of seems like what
Yeah.
what you're doing, going from the treadmill to the floor to the rower to the floor.
Yeah, so now when it comes to things like with that, so right now, so we do have, like I said, we have different structure of classes. So you may see sometimes where they do a run and then they do a row, or if they do a run going into an exercise, those are specialty classes. You may not see that as much, but you do see them along the lines. Normally, they'll have time to recover before they transition into the next spot. So their mind is already in that resting state before they start to shift their focus onto the weight floor stuff to strengthen.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's one. Now, say for instance, if it's still heightened, say for instance, I'll use an example just on the floor. If you're going from a jump squat into a plank, how can
Yes.
we mimic that? So we definitely talk about rest time and how it's important. So if you just did, I would say if we did 6 explosive jump squats, the plank, it could serve as both an active recovery if you're just holding that plank and you're just settling down a little bit and just trying to work on the muscles in the core, or you give yourself that rest time and then you go right into it and just know that, hey, when we work those muscles in the core, it keeps the core rigid when you jump into that jump squat, and it'll help you absorb that landing more. So I think it just, like, as a coach, just being there to tell members why and why these moves are important and how it will help them for success. As long as the member knows why they're doing this, they'll definitely be able to go into it with that intention already. So just relaying that message. I mean, of course, you don't want to just be like, yeah, just hold the plank after you jump squat. Like, no,
Like,
you
why am I
know,
doing this? What is the
yeah,
point of that?
why am I
Yeah.
doing it? Because it hurts. No.
Because I want to, I
No.
want to torture you. I want to see you in pain. Yeah.
Yeah, now there's times that, I mean, especially in my classes, they'll be like, Coach, why? And I'm like, just do it.
There's always going to be times in any type of class setting like that
No,
where,
yeah.
why are you doing this to me? It's like, because I love you and I want to see you succeed. That's why I'm doing
Yeah.
this to you.
No, but yeah, but a lot of it, we are big on the why with members, like why they're doing what they're doing and how it will help them in the end of the day. I mean, each member is going to have their own goal, and what they're doing in those classes will get them to that specific goal that they have.
I think that's a great place to leave it off. Everyone's individual. Everyone has their own goal, and finding whether it's through Orangetheory, whether it's through CCHS, finding a place that allows you to reach those goals and will help you kind of cultivate whatever the goal and specific aim that you have in health and fitness. So, Tom, before we get out of here, let the people know where they can find you. Any social media, if you have anything you plan on doing in the future, anything like that, let the people know.
No, I'm just a turtle in the shell. No. No. So if you guys want to follow me, my Instagram is T Cannisi Fits. So I don't know if you have my handle or not, but I know it's definitely posted on your Instagram. There we go. It's in that chat. So if you want to give me a follow, that's fine. You'll also see the link to our studio's Instagram as well for Orangetheory. You can always find an Orangetheory near your area. So whether you're in upstate New York or if you're out in California or even outside of the US, you'll be able to find a studio, go in, try a class, and you never know. I would have never thought that I would go into group exercise training. Adam knows this from experience with me. I was big on one-on-one training.
Yeah.
I always loved that one-on-one connection, but I'm telling you, the community that Orangetheory builds is not only amazing, in that family feeling aspect, but it's also good for the mind. And I think that was one of the most important things that kept me with this company for as long as I am right now, is that family community. And I promise you guys, when you walk into a studio, you will feel welcome, you'll feel loved. And on top of that, you will get a good workout and you'll get coaches who are right behind you every step of the way.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Tom. And also to piggyback off that, make sure you check out, this is kind of funny going from that to this, but make sure you guys check out also the CCHS. ConnectedCHS.com. We offer in-home personal training where we bring all of our stuff to you. We bring all of our equipment to you. We do the workouts for you at your house, and then we leave. It's almost like the grocery stores where you come in, you do your self-checkout, and then you leave, right? That's kind of we're almost like the Uber of personal training. So we do in-home personal training, virtual personal training, as well as group training. If you want to have a little switch up, we are going to start branching out into different areas. So stay tuned for that. Always, like I said, you can check out our link that's at the bottom of the screen right now. Our website is connectedchs.com. Again, we got a bunch of different services over there for you guys: in-home personal training, virtual, and group setting.
And guys, I just want to add to that, this man, Adam, I'm telling you right now, I've known him for a pretty long time in college when we went and did our trainings together. He is a really good trainer. He knows what he's talking about. He does his research. Definitely would 100% recommend that you guys, work with him. He is going to be there for you guys 100% of the way. He is so detailed. And I tell him this all the time. I'm like, you are so detailed. I'm like, literally, if I you as a coach, it's just, I want to see all coaches like that, just approach the craft as you do. So definitely go with him. He is 100% great guy to talk to and great guy to train with. All right. Make sure you do it.
Thank you. You're making me blush a little bit. I gotta get off
I saw the face was a little red there.
Thank you for the kind words, Tom, and thank you everyone for joining us. This was episode 3 of How It's All Connected Lifestyle Medicine with Tom Cannisi. You guys have a great day. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, guys.